So let's look at a diagram of what an envelope might look like. So again, remembering that we have an attack, some kind of decay, sustain, and release. In terms of a graph here, we have time going across the bottom. So starting at 0 seconds and going across, let's say for a second or so. And then on this axis, we have volume measured in decibels. So minus infinity dB, so no sound, all the way up to the full volume, 0 dB, and then adding or subtracting from that. So typically for an envelope, what we're going to do is at time 0, we probably might start at minus infinity dB. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to some point in time and then also a level. So let's say we're going to go up to 0 dB for about maybe a quarter of a second or so. So that's going to be this slope. So this is my attack, which is time, but I also have to, for some systems, we're also going to give it a level in terms of dB. Then we're going to have some kind of decay to our next point, and this is also going to be time. So this is my decay. And so we're going to go from the attack to the decay for a certain amount of time. And where we stop in terms of the decay, in terms of level, in terms of dB, is that's the sustain level, right? So this is the sustain. And so that's going to hold as long as the note is being held. So in terms of, let's say I'm playing a digital synth on a keyboard, I just hold the note down. It's going to sustain indefinitely until I come to the release. And then release again is time. And again, typically release will also have a level that I'm going to end on, which will probably be infinity or minus infinity dB. So this is our release. We start at infinity dB. We have some kind of attack over time that goes to a peak value. The decay is time, which goes to the sustain value. And then release is time that goes from the sustain level to typically infinity. Of course, all of these are adjustable, and you can do what you want with this. So that's the basics of how an envelope works. So this is affecting the volume or decibels of a sound over time. But remember, we can also apply envelopes to pitch if we wanted to. We can apply an envelope to filters, all kinds of things. So the way this works in analog and digital audio is that an envelope typically has an attack, decay, sustain, and release. And so you can see we have all those parameters here in operator. We have attack, decay, and release along the top. And you'll notice that these are set in time. And then we also have an initial value, a peak, and this is for the attack, and a sustain level. So you can see if I increase the attack, I'm adding more time from an initial value. In this case, the initial is nothing, but I can bring this up as well. And so I could also start with some sound. Typically, this starts at 0, but there might be occasions where you actually want the initial value to start up high. And then we're going to go to this attack, and this is time. What we're also going to give this attack is a peak level. So we could also bring this down or up. The decay is measured in time, and so I can increase or decrease this. And then I can also control the level in decibels. And then finally, I have release, which is measured in time. And so for every MIDI note, whether it's played on a keyboard or it's done through piano roll, every MIDI note has a note on and a note off. When the note on is detected by a synthesizer, that's the moment where we start with the attack and the initial value. Then when we let go of the key or the piano roll note stops, that's the moment that the release happens. So the release could be set to nothing or something very small, or it can be very, very long. So that's the basics of how an envelope works. And so let's take a look at some typical kind of shapes that we might find in digital audio. So here's an envelope where we have, so the initial is set down all the way. The attack is about 1 second. The decay is about 1.3 seconds. The peak of the attack is just down a little bit, minus 2 dB. The sustain level is also minus 13. So this is the sustain. This is the peak. And I'm releasing about 1.1, 1.2 seconds or so is the release time. So here's what that sounds like. Here's another envelope that has a gradual attack, a very quick decay, and no sustain, and almost an immediate release. And so what this is going to do is it's going to start at no sound. It's going to, over the course of 1 second or so, it's going to get to minus 8 dB. And then the decay will go from this value to nothing in 1 millisecond. And then the release is 1 millisecond. So that's basically nothing. And here's what that sounds like. So hopefully you might hear some interesting applications of a sound like that. Here's another envelope with a very quick, actually no attack. So basically starting right when I play the note, when I start playing the note. Then it immediately starts a decay, and it goes from the highest level, 0 dB, and then over the course of 2.11 seconds, it goes all the way down to nothing. And so the release, really, there is no release. The release really happens here. So I actually released, the note before the decay finished, and so you get a little click, a little pop. And so we get that very quick release. So here's another envelope where the shape is a little bit unusual. I have about an 87 millisecond attack. The initial is set to nothing. My peak is 17 dB, this peak right here. My decay is 3.2 seconds to the sustain, but my sustain's actually higher. So there's actually, it's not a decay, it's actually gonna, so for about 87 milliseconds, it's gonna get to this level, and then it's also gonna slowly go from minus 17 to minus 12 dB. And then it's gonna hold at that value until I release the key, and then it's gonna do a very gradual, almost a 7-second release at the end. So this is a type of envelope we might find with a pad. So just a word about how Operator deals with these values. If you find that you want to reset things, what I can do is if I just double click on all of these, it kind of goes to a factory preset here. So where my initial attack is 0, the default is that a 600 millisecond decay, a 50 millisecond release, and 0 dB for sustain and peak, and then the initial is set to no sound. Here's how we can use an envelope with an LFO. What I'm doing is I'm going to apply an LFO to oscillator A. And so what I'm going to do is if I just bring this all the way over to here, then the LFO is going to apply for the full duration of this. And you'll see that this envelope is just very boring and there's nothing here. So, but now what I could do is I could gradually bring in the vibrato. So it's going to start with nothing, and then it's going to, over 2 seconds, slowly introduce the LFO. And then it stops right away. I suppose I could increase this. I might have to increase this one too, actually. So there we have no vibrato. It comes in, it holds as long as we're holding it, then we release, the vibrato slowly goes away. Here's a case where now for the LFO, I have 0 attack and a pretty quick decay. Well, 3.4 seconds. So the vibrato is going to start at full value right away, and it's going to just tape, just sort of like disappear over 3.4 seconds. Also notice that my rate's set pretty high and the amount is pretty high as well. I'll make it a little bit more obvious. See this nice little kind of wobble at the beginning of the sound. And then the pure tone. So it sounds pretty cool. So that's a cool, interesting attack that sort of has a little bit of kind of almost like a flutter to it at the very beginning. Here's how we can use an envelope with a filter to really kind of change the character of the sound over time. So I'm going to turn off the filter. So I've got this kind of brass sound. And now if I apply this filter to it, it's doing some really nice things there. So notice that I can kind of change the slope. So here it's getting to the peak pretty quickly. But if I change this, and if I adjust this, you'll hear it kind of go up in terms of the filter sweep, and then I can change where it sort of settles in on. So I can have it sort of go up and come back down right away, or maybe not come down quite so much. And maybe I'll split the difference there. And of course I can now just change the attack so it's very kind of quick and then coming down. And I can even try some different settings here. That's way too long. That's pretty cool. Here's another example of using a filter. So I've just got some white noise in my first oscillator. Everything else here is turned off. So it's just white noise. But now what I'm doing is with the filter, I'm using a state variable filter. I've brought the frequency quite a bit down. Now the key here is that I'm going to adjust things like attack, decay, sustain, release. I can adjust these kind of breakpoints a little bit. I can adjust, the slope, right, with these breakpoints. But then also I want to make sure that I'm applying 100% of this envelope to the oscillator. So that's an important step to not forget when you do this. And so here's what this would sound like. So again, filter off, filter on. That's pretty cool.